Hi, this is Ted. I'm thinking about changing this channel a little bit and really focusing on what AI can do in the realm of looking for real miracles versus fake miracles. Because I believe there's a lot, look what's going on here. Moses was face to face with people who could produce miracles. All right? And Jesus said there will be many coming to me in that day saying, Lord, Lord, didn't we do these, prophesy? Didn't we do miracles in your name? And you'll say, I never knew you. So even though people are doing miracles in Jesus' name, there are fake miracles. And, I'm going to believe, honestly, this is where I'm coming to the conclusion of having studied this for umpteen years, probably about 15 years now, through the scriptures, through different readings of books, hundreds of articles, and I'm really coming down to the conclusion that there are these miracles that can be produced, and they're not miracles. It's just that it's a realm. It's this area that we don't know much about. And because we don't know much about it, we assume it's either of the devil or it's God, but it's not something that's human. But there is human ability stuff going on over and over again that looks like it's otherworldly, because we just don't yet understand this realm. And we have in science, I know many people, I don't like the word science. Medical studies, different studies are discovering this more and more in the last 50, 60 years. I will even go back to World War II, where some nurse is giving people basically some kind of solution, water solution, for their pain, because they run out of morphine. And this is kind of one of the beginnings of understanding the placebo effect. Why? Because once they got the water, the saline solution, in their system, all over the place, Army soldiers with major pain, with major issues, missing limbs, all kinds of stuff from the war-torn bodies, were feeling relief, even though it was nothing. We've had sham surgeries. In other words, doctors go in and cut up the knee, do nothing, and then they put the person back into real life, and in real life they claim that there's been a healing taking place, they feel better. And I'm going into the territories of how this works with faith healing, because just the belief system itself does something. It's not huge, as many others would say. This is the problem. You get these wackos who think, I can do anything with my mind. No, you can't. There are limits. You're not going to cure a physical disease with this kind of stuff. It's going to be very limited. Okay, I've gotten into a lot of this before, but what I want to get to today is something else. I want to get into how AI has helped me tremendously to dig deeper into this territory and understand so much. And right away, there are going to be people, AI, because there is a backlash going on. By the way, before I go on, there has been a backlash with reading. Why? Because this is way back. We're talking about millennium ago. We have, because who was it? I think it was Socrates, who just did not like reading. He thought we should be talking things out and passing down this kind of information rather than writing it down. There's something taken away from writing down. Okay, computers brought a backlash. Manufacturing, the way we do manufacturing nowadays, brought a huge backlash. People were burning down manufacturing buildings and the whole works. They're called the Luddites. And we have the computer bringing backlash. I think he just brought that up, but I'm going to bring it up again. Why? I don't know. I didn't really dig into that deep about computers, but I do know this, that the pocket calculators brought a backlash. Why? Because people will no longer think anymore. They'll no longer be able to sit down and figure out on their own these mathematical problems. So there was a backlash on that. There's backlash on any kind of technology that produces big change. AI, I admit, is probably one of the biggest changes technology has ever brought. And because of that, there will be a huge backlash. But I'm going to be upfront, forward. The reason, and there is legitimacy to the backlash, because what's going on is most people do not understand how to use AI properly. They use it for quick solutions, quick answers. AI promises that. It sounds like it knows everything and is very confident. And people, these are things that really kind of get to us. Not only that, it's going to support whatever you think, because it wants you. Bottom line is the dollar. These companies that design AI, they want you to continue to work with them. They don't want to be disagreeing with you on anything unless you really tell it to disagree, because it wants to make you happy. So you keep on coming back to them and end up paying them with either through advertisement or through connecting and paying a little bit for better service. All right. Having said all that, let's get into some of this stuff. Why do I think AI is a great tool? And I mean an amazing tool. And I'm well aware of many of the issues with it, many of the problems with it. Very aware of it. I have spent 3 years, no, it's over 3 years now, digging into AI, learning all I can about the history, about its relationship with what's going on. And I think it is, in some areas, the greatest tool we've ever had. And especially in the area of research and digging into things. And for this video, into learning how basically to dig in deeper to what's going on in that world. It's a different realm that I call it. It's unexamined, or it's a realm that is unexplored. And that is the human possibilities, both positive and negative. In other words, there are limits to these possibilities. As I've mentioned, I gotta focus on that, because people tend to, in a lot of the New Age and a lot of different groups, will tend to over-exaggerate what we can do with our mind, and over-exaggerate, much like somebody like Kenneth Copeland would over-exaggerate how important the word is. Is the word important? Absolutely. But we're getting a little bit sidetracked here. The fact of the matter is, words are important, and what we say is important. We will be judged for every word that we say. Having said all that, the fact of the matter is we can go way overboard, like Kenneth Copeland, or by many of these New Agers who would say, oh, we can do anything with our mind, all that kind of stuff. So what I'm looking for is what we can verify. And here's what we're going to get into here. Why do I think AI can help me? Back in 2016, AI was relatively new. I'm not going to get too much about the history of it, but it was relatively new, this whole new way of doing AI, which is now very dominant in AI. And there was a game. Now, most Americans would not know this game, but it's Go. And most of your Asians know about this because it's huge in Asian countries. And there was, the people in England who developed something called AlphaGo, they were trying to beat the best human in the world's most complicated game. And so they went for the game of Go. They trained their system to beat the game of Go, to win the game of Go against the best human. How did they do this? They have the game playing against itself, learning patterns, learning moves. And it did this for months. After training it, how to play, all this kind of stuff, eventually it gets really good. And there's this big game in AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol. Lee Sedol was like one of the top Go players in the world. He comes from South Korea, and he's really good, really good. And every 200 million people are watching this, mostly Asian, because that's their game. And they know this is a game of strategy. This is a game of skill. You got to know, and it's a game of knowledge. There are whole schools where kids will spend their entire school in learning the game of Go, and it's so cool. They're learning strategy. They're learning how to use their brain. And so we put a computer up against that. It's called AlphaGo. It's played its own game millions of times. And AlphaGo won 4 out of 5 matches, and it shocked the world. It shocked the world, literally. And big, huge ramifications. Go players all around. We have been playing this game for 2,000 years, and it played one move that turned a game around that nobody has ever played, at least in their understanding, at least in their memory, in their history. So they begin learning AI has moves that no human has ever thought of. And eventually, what happens, an app comes out a year later that teaches people how AI is moving, the moves it makes and why. And people connect to this app because they want to understand how can I improve my game? And they learn. And there's definitely people who cheat, just use that app to win games, by cheating, just use the app. But other people are using that app to learn its moves so we can improve our own moves. And that is the very center of how we can use AI for our advantage rather than our disadvantage. Those who cheat, those who allow AI to do everything, this is called slop AI.
Oh my God.
And that will actually be detrimental to you because you're no longer thinking, because your mind is no longer up front. You are letting it rule you. It's kind of like you're in charge of this big group of followers, a big group in a business world. And you're in charge, but you're letting them rule everything. You're kind of like Enron's employees, the ones who are doing the markets and who basically take over the entire company while the CEO sits there and says, I can't do anything about this. That's what AI is doing to people because they're letting that happen. They don't know how to control AI. And through this, I'm going to help you understand how you can use AI to become a better player. Because what they found with the AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol, what they found with that app is that players got tremendously, not just a little bit, but hugely better. So the bottom professional players were actually better than the top of the professional players 2 years ago. In other words, I'm from 2018. I'm playing a game that's better than, even though I'm in the bottom of the profession, I'm playing a better game than people on the top 2 years ago. And this has never happened in the history that we have since 2001, since 1960s, I think is when it started. So what's happening is you have this group of people who are using AI to their own advantage. Now we can do that with studying, I'm going to call it the realm. It's that area of the brain, it's that area of how we respond to things like the placebo effect, how we respond to what's going on stage, how we respond to people coming up to us on the street and saying, God is going to heal you, or how and why we respond with throwing up when we think we're being delivered by demons. All these things, AI has been able to help me tremendously to be able, I've been studying this kind of stuff since I think 2007, through the scriptures, through videos, through all these different territories, and through books. And now that I'm using AI to help me, it's helped me break through so many territories. For example, I load up the pages of Kasdorf's book, the one where he has 10 miracles that are proven, and I've never seen anybody be able to basically fight him or have a good way to undo what he says, a good way to tear down what he says. Why? Because Kasdorf does a very careful job. He's a doctor. Up until AI, it pretty much just concluded, okay, he's done something medical tests would never do, in that he's chosen 10 that he knows already the solution. It's going to be hard to disprove him. That's something medical studies don't do, because because they want to understand what's happening in the whole, not just on the successes. All right, so that was my best defense against him. That, and he's geared to find a positive rather than a negative. He's not looking objectively. He's looking very subjectively. He's fighting Nolan's book on searching for miracles. And he's going to end up basically giving 10 miracles that at the time I think were very legitimate, hard to disprove. I put the pages, many of the pages into AI saying, help me work through this. And I determined even before I put them in, I said, the difference, I need to know the difference between I think he wrote it about 1971 or so, but between that year and today, what have we discovered that would change this? And I found that in all of the situations, in the vast majority, it's been a while, so I don't remember all of them, but I could disprove any one of them, basically on the line that it was just old medicine. It's been, 50, 60 years now, and things have changed. We've discovered certain things. So basically, I call this God in the gaps, even though God in the gaps is used by atheists to disprove Christians. As Christians, we can also create the illusion that just because I don't understand it, it must be a miracle. Well, he didn't understand. There's a lot of stuff that science didn't know back then. So even from a medically scientific point of view, a lot of what he was saying about Catherine Kuhlman and her miracles were just not real. And they weren't all Catherine Kuhlman centered. Some of them were centered in other areas. He's looking for miracles wherever he can find them. And just the fact that he could only find 10, that's telling as well, because Nolan, he looked into 70 some different ones. He got 27 responses, was able to dig in as much as Kasdorf did, and he didn't find anything that went beyond psychosomatic. All right, that's Kasdorf. So putting pages in and asking AI to help me with that has helped tremendously to be able to see the difference between 60 years and what I call God of the gaps. Now, street healers. There was one that looked pretty convincing. So I put the whole, I directed AI to the YouTube, and I said, tell me about this. And it broke it down, and it revealed stuff that I hadn't seen. This guy's favoring his leg. Well, precisely what happened is you have the street healer coming up and healing this guy from a bad leg because he has a cane. Well, there are several things that's going on here. This guy's, on the street is not the one with the cane. He's getting healed of the wrong leg. In other words, he's jumping around in the end on his good leg. And the street healer all along has been deceived because he thinks because the cane is on his right side that it's his right leg that's bad. Turns out it's the opposite. Oh, it might have been on his left side. I don't remember. Anyway, but the point is, AI is pointing out that stuff. Plus, it's pointing out that even before the guy comes up, he's protecting his bad leg. And because the cane is on the opposite side, which, by the way, you're trained if you have a cane, and if you're going to use it for your life, you're trained to use it on the opposite side. At least most doctors will do that, from what I understand. Anyway, so the way it goes, though, is it just pointed out entirely. And I had to argue with AI a lot on this, because arguing is a part of the way that we get through AI. You argue with it until it gives you the truth. Sometimes it does. Oh, I'll get into that in a minute. Sometimes it gives you false answers. All right, street healers, breaking down the scene, tremendously helpful. The Bible, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how much it's helped me in the Bible dig in. And one of the main reasons I can do this, first of all, I know a lot about the Bible. I always tell people with AI, dig in first of all with what you already know. Why? Because it helps you see where AI is making mistakes. It helps you to see how AI thinks. And that's all important. All right, so in the Bible, so I go in the Bible. I spent years memorizing the Bible, and so I know a lot about the Bible, a lot more than I ever talk about. Anyway, I'm not going to get too far into that, But that's the first territory that I really begin discovering how AI works. There are other territories as well. But anyway, but it's helped me in the Bible, in understanding Ezekiel. I'll get into that a little bit. But Ezekiel has just, oh my gosh, I've learned so much about Ezekiel. Once again, how can I trust AI? Because I go to Perplexity, because Perplexity gives me sources to look at. And sometimes those sources are not legit. In other words, it's pulling something out of the hat and saying, oh, I know this for certain. This is the way it is. And no, it isn't. I know that because the sources you're giving me don't line up with that. And I tell AI that. And sometimes it'll find me a different source and say, okay, here's where you can go. And yeah, okay, AI was right. And sometimes it says, sorry, you made a mistake. That's the way AI works. But you see what's happening? My brain is working. It's not just going on hold and letting AI take over. I am controlling the group. I am controlling the people under me in AI, the AI under me. And that's how it's supposed to work. All right, so dig into the sources, find the sources. And even the sources, a lot of times, come on, they're human beings. They're good, sometimes spot on, but sometimes people can make mistakes. Anyway, I'm learning about, well, so many things. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I do want to warn you about what's going to be happening coming up here. And here's a few warnings. It caters to my subjective opinions. In other words, it is seeing that I don't like what's going on in the charismatic movement. It sees that right away. So it feeds my subjectivity. And so I have to tell it to be more objective. Find ways if there's, I tell it first of all, be scientific about it. All right, let's look at the medical studies. Let's not just go off people's testimonies. Medical studies, by the way, don't allow for that type of. Somebody comes in and says, "This cured me." Okay, why did it cure? Whatever. The fact of the matter is, it does not accept anecdotal evidence. It's not a form of evidence, and that's what testimonies is. And if you get into anecdotal evidence, the best anecdotal evidence is coming out of Bethel up in, and when I say best, I don't mean that it's good. I just mean the most effective anecdotal evidence comes straight out of Bethel up in Redding, California. But I can tell you right now, there's a lot of exaggeration, a lot of passing down fake stories, a lot of stuff that just don't add up. Because their whole concept is, if we keep on telling these stories, we're going to bring heaven down. And that's not true. If you keep on telling these stories, all you're going to be doing, you do get people excited. Testimonies are powerful, really powerful, but it doesn't bring heaven down automatically. Anyway, especially when you're making stuff up, when you're creating illusions and saying that such and such were healed in this dramatic way, you're exaggerating because you know that people will respond to that exaggeration better than they will the reality. And you're just making stuff up. Oh, who knows what? Or you're passing on stuff that other people, come on. If you believe this stuff, study what is the best thing? Urban legends. Why? Because so many of stories that I totally believed, reading urban legends, I was actually disappointed. When I read years ago, I read these several books on urban legends, and I realized a lot of my favorite stories weren't true, and they're just, who knows where they started, but they got there. Anyway, passed off as truth. So warnings, it will cater to my subjective opinions and what I believe. Secondly, it'll tell you how wonderful you are. Oh my gosh, don't give it. They're trying to keep you tied to that particular app. So if I'm talking to ChatGPT, it's going to say, that was such a smart, brilliant answer you had, or what question you had. It wants to pat you on the back constantly. It gets a little annoying. Anyway, there will be hallucinations. it's digging into a pile of knowledge, unbelievable amount of knowledge, and sometimes it gets certain things confused and certain things connected that just don't add up, so it might make up something from time to time. And but in all, I will say this: despite the problems, and I will add one of there are issues on how it's built and all that kind of stuff. I'll get into that, a lot of this stuff. But I do want to say, in the end, you need to be in charge. You are the one created in God's image, not AI, and you should be the one who's controlling it, not you. And if you can learn how to do that and walk with me, because I'm going to help you through this. I've spent 3 years and I have 20 certificates from Harvard, from Duke, from the University of Michigan, from so many different places, studying AI. And it is an amazing tool if you know how to use it. But it is going to just not be good for you if you just give into the slop. All right, we're going to get into much more of this stuff in the next few weeks, months, who knows how long. But this is Ted. You all have a good day.